Well, it's me hosting, by the way. Just kidding. It's not Keane. But welcome to the Devil's Advocate podcast, where I'm in the wrong seat. It should be Keane here, but he's finished. But we've got a lot to talk about. Got Dale O'Donnell beneath me. Stretty News. Got Phil in the bottom corner. Good to see him, of course. And Keane. How are we all, gentlemen? How are we all before we get into tonight's pleasantries of football?
Well, I'm just about alive anyway.
How the fuck,
so yeah, I'm on the mend. So yeah, I'm glad to be back anyway, but at least in a guest capacity for once.
Fuck, I thought this was a police lineup.
So why are you not up top then?
I thought this was a police lineup. I'm like, how the fuck have I ended up on a podcast with the Shady Bunch? Like, Jesus, some fucking
hey, talk for yourself.
Hey, there's some class A abusers in here. That's all I'm going to
I
say.
just abuse people with confectionaries, or sweets, as it's known over here.
It's like a dark web on here.
Top search. Oh, it is good to see you, lads. It's good to see you. We've got a lot to get through, obviously, football-wise. Keane, obviously, good bit of health, obviously. It's good to see you. I know you've not been well, mate. It's good to have you on. Mark, disappointed you dropped out, mate, but we'll have words. No, we won't, mate. You'll just have a boring reaction show. Dale, it is good to see you. It's been a while.
Okay,
How's things been you?
It's been too long. It's been a long time since I'm on this show. It's probably since last season. We've had a big summer at the club, lots of speculation, and now the season has started when we were all optimistic, and now we've a cloud of negativity hanging over us. Yeah,
absolutely. And speaking of, obviously, Phil, you're out of all four of us probably the most active when it comes to United in this sense. What's your thoughts on?
I'm glad you finished that sentence with that. Well, they're going to come in most active with what?
Do you know what? I always keep it clean. But just in terms, obviously, you're probably the most active out of all four of us when it comes to United. Just in general, like, what's your? Because obviously, Dale's just mentioned about summers and transfer windows and United activity. What's your overall thoughts on United in the summer? And also, how are you as well, by the way?
Doing good, mate. Thank you. To be fair, I would say gentlemen on this podcast are all pretty active and well informed. So easily as good as I am. But obviously, it's been a really bad 2 weeks, really, because pretty much ever since United teased the announcement of Mason Greenwood, it's been constant negativity. Rasmus Højlund injury hasn't helped. Mason Mount now injured. Lots of players can't get out. The bad news: most fans wanted Harry Maguire going. That's not going to happen. That looks of things. United have more loans than Bernie Madoff. I don't understand. How is it that Man City can sell a player from their academy for 15 million, Shea Charles, who's never played a first team game, but United can't sell Brandon Williams? How many first team games has he got? United sold Noam Amarin for less than what Ferguson sold Mark Robbins for. That's ridiculous. It's totally ridiculous. I don't care what add-ons you've got. I don't care. That is just unbelievable to me. Ten Hag has a lot of things to overcome, notably the legacy of inaptitude that he's been left with from Woodward. Richard Arnold started out okay, but so did Woodward. Woodward started out all the best of intentions, and for me, I think what's going on at the club over the last 3-4 weeks is nothing short of a disgrace. Of course, there's the takeover, which doesn't help, and United once again showed a completely tone deaf to the sentiment of fans, and even when doing the right thing is so easy, they find it difficult.
I agree. Just to confirm you there as well, because I've done a quick, as always, we've got fast keyboards, so I'm a fast typer. Brandon Williams has made 51 appearances for Man United since 2019.
Yeah, how can you not sell him? And here's the thing, lads. The whole Mason Greenwood situation was exacerbated primarily because of the same reasons United always have problems doing everything. Doing the right thing was not the most important thing. Doing the profitable thing was the most important thing. And that statement that they made was written that way for two reasons. One, to justify not sacking him, and two, to make sure whoever wants to buy him isn't buying damaged goods. So they have plausible deniability with their fans to say, he didn't do it. He just needs a change of environment. And of course the Glazers, it's laughable when people say Glazers should donate this money to women's charity. They have no chance of that happening. Zero. Right? Now, these are the same people that sent Jameis Winston 2 weeks after he had charges filed against him for sexual battery or everything else. They don't care. They never have. So this is primarily because the most important thing for the Glazers is making sure they didn't sacrifice an asset. And that was what the alleged investigation, essentially what they were doing was kicking the can down the road because they wanted to be a new owner's problem. And then when they realized they couldn't make it a new owner's problem, they had to deal with it. Everything was set up to one of two things is going to happen here. We either keep him or we sell him. But you'll notice I didn't say we're going to sack him, right? And so United had to try to write a statement based on one of those two outcomes. I'm still not convinced he won't play for the club again.
I just wanted to ask, and obviously Dale, feel give your opinion on this as well, but do you ever think they would ever be in a considerable position to actually physically sack him? Or do you think that was just a complete out of the option based on what you've just said?
Well, go ahead, Dale.
I think it was out of the option from the beginning because this decision would have been very easy to make if they were willing to do that. It would have been made when the charges were dropped. It went on for what was it 6 months? Because they dragged this on for. So it's quite clear that they were kicking something down or kicking some can down the line. And ultimately, I think, and rightly so, a lot of the finger has been pointed at Richard Arnold. He's got bosses that make the big decisions, and he has to go and lead them ultimately. And I think that is, I think you get the root of the problem there. Yeah,
Keane, what about yourself, mate? What's your overall thoughts in this situation? I know, for ourselves, obviously, we've spoken about this always in the group chat. We've as much as we can, but at times, like we said before we went live, I said, I barely spoke on this myself because when it comes to ins and outs, I don't know all of it, and if you don't know all of it, it's best not to speak on it. Well, that's just my take. That's not actively avoiding the situation, but if you don't know, I don't talk about it. Just in general, what's your thoughts on all this situation as well?
I think the club dealt with it horribly. Look, they once the fact that they'd never sacked him when they quite rightly should have, is disgraceful. And the fact that they threw out so many different leaks in the last kind of month or so, kind of, trying to put out positive PR by him coming back, like that, they dealt with it horribly. And the fact that, it took mass kind of protests from the fans online, and so Richard Arnold's emails got bombarded and the club got bombarded. It took that for them to actually say, right, we shouldn't bring him back, when common sense really should have prevailed and they should have known so that they shouldn't have brought him back. So, look, I'm glad now that the kind of saga at the moment is over-ish, I suppose, like the fact they've confirmed he's not going to play this season and he's not going to kind of bring the club into disrepute anymore. But the fact of the matter is, I'm worried if they loan him out, do they try kick, like the lad said, kick the can further down the road, and do they try say he go through this whole kind of recovery story and bring him back? But personally, I don't think he should play for the club again. But I suppose for me, I'd rather talk about kind of the future of the current playing squad, and kind of how we can rebuild after kind of two, I suppose, shaky games. Really.
If I could just add one thing on that, ultimately the Premier League need to have a rule where when players are accused, they're immediately suspended. And pending an independent investigation paid for by the Premier League by actual professionals who are qualified to look at this type of evidence, of forensic evidence, which Richard Arnold clearly fucking isn't. Richard Arnold is an accountant. How in the fucking God's name can Richard Arnold investigate alleged rape, sex coercion, everything else? He hasn't a fucking clue what he's doing.
I noticed that as well in the statement. I think is what the third or fourth paragraph. He mentioned that,
So these, clubs can't be investigating their own players, and it should be taken out of their hands. And in some ways, it would remove the responsibility from United, because if the Premier League come around after 6 months and say, "Hey, we've investigated this thoroughly, we're the ones find them innocent," then United have no problem bringing them back, right? Yeah, and they can just go, "Hey, we're kids didn't do anything, we're bringing them back." But there should be a rule where these players are immediately suspended if there's a criminal investigation, and they this gets. You look at someone like Ivan Toney. Ivan Toney gets suspended for months over a betting issue. That's taken out of the club's hands immediately, right?
Yeah.
The Premier League launched an investigation into betting. Why can't the Premier League turn around and pay a professional, independent, regulator organization to investigate these things, right? Take it out of the club's hands and let them come to the conclusion Thomas Partey should not be playing football, right? I mean, when we talk about these issues, Johnny Evans is being offered a contract. Johnny Evans is an accused rapist, right? There's, you can't turn around. I don't like whataboutery, but you can't turn around and say it's okay for Cristiano Ronaldo. The evidence against him was overwhelmingly inculpatory that he committed non-consensual sodomy, right? And say it's okay, but this is bringing the club into disrepute. Exactly what is bringing the club into disrepute that hasn't been done 1,000 times before, right? But Mason Greenwood now has to be the gold standard for everybody. There can never be again another player who gets to play for his club while under a criminal investigation. He has to be suspended immediately. And I want to make sure the media launch that relentless crusade to make sure that happens. Because, look, if Mason Greenwood, I have no problems getting rid of him. None whatsoever.
Yeah.
Right? But let's have it right. I mean, we have players playing at football clubs right now that have committed horrendous behavior in the past. And to me, once you get into something as serious as this, they should not involve football clubs doing their own internal investigation. That's fucking ridiculous to me.
There are examples of that up here as well. Obviously, like Scotland,
David Goodwill.
David Goodwill, example. Clyde, it was like the Clyde women's general manager and the Clyde women's team, they all quit because he was still involved. He then got sold to Rafe Rovers. And the situation then rose again at Rovers, and then they all, like the women's team, the manager, the lot, all threatened to quit if he was not kicked out of the club. They kicked him out a day later. Like, they cancelled his contract, the lot, up shit creek, he was gone. Like, it was all gone within like a day. But it rose from that situation. So that, and I agree. I don't know if it was a journalist or just a fan account, but I saw someone on Twitter who made a fair comment saying the Premier League should act in the way like the MLS and like the American governments when it comes to like comes to hand on a player, like handle it accordingly and through an appropriate system, whatever that is, and deal with it accordingly.
Well, let's talk. What the fuck's the point of a fit and proper test if you don't act fit and proper when you own a football club? I mean, what is the point?
Good question.
Good question. So there has to be tighter regulation on how clubs are owned, how they're sold, how they're bought, how they're run. I mean, a footballer has to, before a footballer can represent Manchester United, they have to excel at the very highest level in their profession. But we can have any dickhead running a football club that has no idea what they're doing. I mean, this is ridiculous. This is.
I love how you're pointing at me.
Oh, we won.
Facts be facts on a Thursday night.
It's not. I'm getting a contact high from you.
but just on that, Phil, because you mentioned and Reece, you mentioned the American sports too. In the NFL, isn't there a commissioner in the NFL that is paid big bucks to kind of make these big decisions because they happen so regularly? And in the Premier League, in the last 2 or 3 years, we could bring up maybe 5 cases that we've heard about and stuff like that, like Partey playing for Arsenal, ongoing investigation and playing. I think Phil mentioned something important there about the media. Now, rightly so, they've gone in on United, and United's behaviour has been absolutely appalling throughout this investigation. But let's look at some of the other clubs that didn't suspend players while investigations were going on and continue to go on, because they seem to be lurking in the background, and there's not the moral compass isn't exactly being thrown at them.
Yeah. It's like that old adage of one rule for one rule for anyone else, or whatever the flaming phrase is. It's like that, and it's hypocritical.
We can't have a situation, lads, where it's, we haven't seen the evidence, because the first premise we work off when it comes to these allegations is we believe the alleged victim, and we work off that premise. So if they're accused, we don't work off the premise that maybe it's bullshit, right? So we work off the premise that they're telling the truth, and maybe after an investigation we find out that they're not. Okay, that's different. But you can't turn around and say believe all women, and then work off the premise, because these are Premier League clubs that are involved in, rainbows taking the knee, all these social movements, and rightly so, you should be supporting them. But you have to. This is the bare minimum, right? And I think it's well, you're right, Dale. To me, I think it's a massive dereliction of duty to the alleged victim and to fans and to clubs, because they're getting no protection.
No.
And hopefully we will see some sort of change in that. Hopefully we will do, but we will move on. But it's a good opening conversation to have, at least, lads, because it has been so upfront in the media as of late. Obviously, we're all heavily involved in social media. We're all United fans, but we're also human beings as well. We see what goes on in life, and we want the right justice to be done. But we are going to move on. We are going to talk particularly about United and one particular situation, because obviously we mentioned injuries. United's injury problems, of course, are massive at the moment, especially in the midfield. And we spent big money on Mason Mount. Yes, he's a good player. I said at the start of the season, that I wasn't sure if it was the right move, but I was still if he comes in regardless, I would see how it goes. But I was still hoping for a certain type of midfielder that would come in that would benefit from a deeper position. But at least we still have an option. That option's now out for 4 to 6 weeks now. So we've now lost a key member of the squad. Classic United. Literally classic. Keane, generally, when it comes to United's midfield, and obviously Ten Hag, again, first 2 games haven't been particularly great performance-wise. Obviously, the midfield has been overrun due to the system situation. But what's your overall thoughts on United's midfield? And we'll make it a 2-part question. Do you think we'll actually improve that midfield through changing the system, or do you think United might actually make one more signing? What are you thinking?
I think he wanted to try to be a bit more proactive, buying Mason Mount and playing 2 advanced states, him and Fernandes. Now, the only problem about that is you have 2 players there who are kind of similar in what they do, which means then you kind of take the risk in transition. And I think that's what we've seen in the last few games, obviously one against Wolves and especially against Spurs in that second half. Last week after watching the Wolves game, I said, against the big 6 sides, we will not be able to play that midfield. I was in the games where we're going to have 60-70% of the ball and teams sit back at home, then I think that midfield can work to a certain extent. But I think in these games where we're going to come up against teams who may have more of the ball, or maybe a 50-50 game, I think on the counter tactic, it could be risky to play that. Last week, I was calling for Scott McTominay to come back into the midfield alongside Casemiro to short things up and give Fernandes a bit more freedom to be the creator and give him kind of more onus in the attacking side. Obviously, he went with that midfield. Mount got injured in the game. Now he's out for 4 to 6 weeks, which is not ideal considering it was going to take time for him to adjust this team, this squad. And now, when he comes back, it's not going to be ideal. So, hopefully, whether Christian Eriksen comes in this weekend and then maybe McTominay away at the Emirates next weekend, I think Ten Hag has to almost do what he done last season after them first 2 games, where he kind of knew he had to take a more conservative approach in certain games. And I think that's what he's going to have to do now with the Mount injury. And in terms of the transfers, Sofian Amrabat's been talked about all summer, mostly actually from the Italian media. Funnily enough, there hasn't been too much talk on the kind of on the English side. So hopefully, if that's a deal that can be done, I think United need to do it. I think obviously for 2 reasons. One, if Casemiro gets injured, we don't have a natural number 6 in our squad right now outside of Kobbie Mainoo, who's also currently injured right now, who can play that position. So we do need to get him in there. And also as well, like I said a minute ago, if we're going to set up in bigger games to try to be a bit more pragmatic, I do think he needs to come in and play alongside Casemiro when needs be.
Yeah, I agree. Dale, obviously, Hell's comment says, if you don't laugh, you cry. Financial fair play, which is an absolute joke anyway, prevents us from buying someone like Amrabat. His price has dropped to 22 million. We're consistently unable to sell players. Just based on that question, obviously, that point there, great point by Hell, but in terms of United's midfield, what's your general thoughts on United's midfield? And again, the question I asked to Keane, will United be proactive with it again? Do you think that'll be just nah, we'll just bide what we've got.
Well, looking at Mason Mount's injury, I'm still more gutted about Kobe's injury, to be quite honest. I think if he was available, we'd look a lot different. I look at that midfield without Mount's injury, and it's too many gaps. I think I wouldn't be surprised if we've seen a defensive midfielder, if they came in, could play that right back role to allow United to overlap in midfield. I think that's what Ten Hag wants to do. I think that was his plan. But ultimately, he's not able to do that with personnel and the lack of transfers that have come in. You mentioned Amrabat. It's not the only midfielder United looked at or are looking at. So it's an area he wants to strengthen. But again, talking about recruitment and talking about having his hands tied behind his back, there's a takeover going on as well. So I think this season might not go as how we all planned. And we may need to buy a bit of time for this takeover to take place. But I'm just looking at even some of the comments that we're getting, some of the comments on social media about it. The optimism is just draining. It's draining out of fans. And it was really high there before the season started. And I was there for the Wolves game and I could see the excitement build up. The performances over pre-season, and looking at that midfield too, the performances over pre-season were not convincing.
Agreed.
It's not just a start of a season where we don't look great. This has been dragging on for a while, and I think it's a bit of an issue. Whether we get new signings in, we need to sell players, and as the comment says, consistently unable to sell players for the right price.
Absolutely. And Phil, you made an interesting comment earlier on about Manchester City, how they can sell one of their academy players for 15 million who's never played a first team minute. I had a look, and you can these flaming websites, they're not always reliable about transfer market values and all that, but Brandon Williams' quoted market value, according to some, was 7 million. So it's 8 million less than what the player that was sold from City. Yeah. When you look at that, it's whether that's accurate or not, it's still ridiculous that United even couldn't afford to get a decent fee. But
just sorry to interrupt, but I'm a bit skeptical sometimes when I see some of the deals City make and the figures that are thrown around. Let's not forget they have 115 charges hanging over their head, and they're very keen to get figures out there. But yeah,
but to be fair, Dale on the Shea Charles one, that was Southampton declaring that. That's where I took that from. Wasn't what City said.
Oh, Southampton confirmed it.
Yeah, that was I was right from Southampton's Twitter feed. But I understand the skepticism on that, and I get that. I mean, we've shared things in private, even about some of the fees that United have published that aren't exactly accurate in terms of what the club are actually receiving. So I understand that to a degree, but if you think about what we're seeing right now, the first two games, this is exactly what we saw after Rashford got injured. So if you really go back to last season, when Rashford got injured and Martinez got injured, everything plummeted. And United never really recovered. They got scraped over the line. And in a lot of those games, they were dreadful. Really, really poor. Second half, one half team, second half falling apart. You know, last time they played Spurs away, second half they fell apart. Exactly the same thing here. These are problems that go much deeper than Mason Mount or system or getting a number 6 in. This is a really big concern because I'm going to tell you something. If you can't get away with playing Mason Mount against Wolves, you're not getting away with him against anyone, right? And here's the thing. Ten Hag knew Mason Mount inside out. That's what we were told that Porty did. So none of what we're seeing would have been a surprise to him about the consequences of playing high, right?
Yeah.
I mean, mind you, I've played high a few times myself, maybe that's what happened. But
always a delight.
We're going higher than the cost of living sometimes. Anyway, seriously, I mean, United didn't look fit in that Wolves game, right? I mean, not just. I was watching how many times we're getting caught in possession and Wan-Bissaka and other players jogging back. And I don't believe that's a lack of desire. I believe that's a lack of fitness. They were physically muscled, right? You know, passes, completely, 5-yard passes being misplaced. I mean, look at the Bruno Fernandes and the Marcus Rashford headers that were missed. Those are pre-season headers when you haven't played them in a couple of months. There's a real lack of sharpness, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, when I look at the body language of those players against Spurs, something was very wrong. It was a very Rannicky performance to me. And I believe the players knew about Mason Greenwood before Saturday. And Marcus Rashford had the look of a player that regretted signing his contract. And I don't know what he was promised, but I would be very concerned because I could easily see United lose this weekend. And if they do, remember they go to Arsenal next, things are going to get darker very, very fast. And there is no gimmicks like they did after Brentford where they sent Anthony and Casemiro to reverse the darkness. There's nothing the Glazers, there's no rabbit that can pull out a hat here. And I made this prediction a month ago where I said if this takeover has been decided before the first game of the season, United start poorly, they're going to tear that place to the ground. And all the distractions that's going on outside, fans protesting already, right? You have the Mace Greenwood debacle, you've got the Anthony debacle hanging over them, you get this takeover, it's in limbo. The United badly need good news. When they play Forest this weekend, there will be no outfield players in that team, no new outfield players in that team. That's not acceptable, right? I don't care whether Mason Mount and Rasmus Højlund are injured. There needed to be more, right? Yeah. And once again, the manager talks about things that the club don't deliver. And, Ten Hag's take responsibility too. Outside of Chelsea, United have spent the most. And there still shouldn't be major gaps in that team, having spent circa 450 million. I mean, you can't talk about a lack of goals, struggling with a lack of goals when you paid 100 million for a winger that United probably didn't need.
And another one essentially as well that he is a good player, Anthony, but as well we've all known this. We've all seen the statistics. They add up. Anthony is not a goal scoring winger. He's a player that will get in and at least actively work for the team. And I've got no problem with that. But you can work for the team, but you also need to produce. Like if this was any other team and he was doing the same thing, he'd be gone. Like realistically, I would like for his numbers to go up because I'd like him to justify his position because I like watching Anthony play. But
well, just one other thing.
But we can't keep relying on Rashford's numbers game on game. We can't.
Ten Hag made two mistakes, in my opinion. One, he paid that money for Anthony when it was obvious United needed a central striker. Right? United could have got away with not signing Anthony last season. And I am 100% certain had they spent that money on a central striker, they would have been in a better situation at the end of the season than what they were in. Secondly, we're talking about a number 6. How many times have we been talking about United need an alternative to Casemiro? Right, that's been obvious from last season. So you sign that player before you sign Mason Mount because you have Casemiro, you have Fernandes that can play in both, or you have Eriksen and Fernandes that can play in both of those positions. You play Jadon Sancho as a central false 9 throughout the summer, so you're well covered in that high central role. Why did you go spend 60 million on a midfielder that at this point is not a necessity, but a holding midfielder is? I Ten Hag has to take some responsibility there.
Just to play devil's advocate, given that's the name of the podcast. With Anthony, and I share the same criticisms, especially about the value. I just look at last season, and we started the season with Ronaldo, who you think about it, had absolutely no presence up front. You look at the rest of the season, it was a Weghorst, he didn't have a presence inside the box to be hitting crosses into. And his assist number,
he didn't even have a presence to get up in the air.
So all of our goals came from Rashford on the left-hand side, and there was no real balance. And I'm just hoping if Højlund gets fit that...
No, I agree with that 100%. I agree. I mean, look, if he's playing with City and he's got Holland, he's sitting on 15 assists, and we're having a completely different conversation about him. I accept that completely. But to me, before you put the rims on the car, you have to make sure you have the engine right.
Yeah.
And to me, the engine is everything down the middle. It's midfield, centre back, centre forward. And Anthony as exciting as he is, and I do agree with the proper number 9 United, he would be much better. But to me, Ten Hag he knew after that Brentford game that Ronaldo couldn't play the way he wanted. What do you say? He's not a pressing monster, right? Or it was Ranić said that. So they knew that he wasn't capable of playing the way he wanted. That was before he signed Anthony. They should have spent that money on a central striker.
Yeah, I know Keane was calling out for Harry Kane for a long time. I was always like meh at times when it comes to Harry Kane, but I will admit in circumstances like this, it would have at least helped. Because if we're not going to be able to create goals, if we're not going to be able to create goals, and let's be real, we create a lot of chances, but we aren't good at them. We can't do it properly. But at least in the circumstance that he's done it at Tottenham for so long, he could have done it on his own. Højlund, I was on a reaction show a couple of weeks ago, and I said about Højlund is I don't think Højlund's going to work that well as much as people think. It's going to take him a long time to adapt because at Atalanta he had a team who played to his strengths. It's going to take us a while to play to his strengths, and people are going to be demanding 20, 30 goals for him at his age because the money we've spent is ridiculous. We've already put him in that pressure. I'm
not criticizing you, let's say, a striker who's injured, right? Because if he's the right guy, he's the right guy. They did that with Rooney. They did that with Van Nistelrooy. They weren't fit right away. They waited because they were the right guy. So if Højlund comes in against Arsenal, whatever, starts scoring goals, it'll be forgotten about. He was into the first couple of weeks of the season. But Agreed. That being said, if they go into the season with Højlund and Martial, right, that's a serious problem.
Oh, yeah. I massively agree. And also, Trevor, as you can see, Dale has shaved. It might not look apparent, but he has shaved.
I shaved today. Actually, the razor went dead. So maybe that explains it.
So basically, the razor touched face dead. So we all know it's definitely the beard. But when you look at it, though, there is still promising players to this squad, though. There is still some good players to this squad. The problem, I think, when you talk about lack of goals as well, is we are relying on one side. But it's the overall contribution. And you mentioned Sancho, and I don't understand why Ten Hag throughout pre-season, Sancho was being trialled as a false 9. And it was actually working really well. He was actually being very effective. Probably our best player in pre-season when you look at it. The minute you get to the first game, and he's not even in the squad, he's in the squad, but he's not even starting. I'm like, why instantly would you drop him? It offered nothing. And it also, to a degree, exposed Garnacho as well. It exposed Garnacho for the fact that Garnacho was completely out of his depth. He's now had to try and recover for the past 2 games where he's still been persisted with. He should be coming off the bench, getting himself up to speed because he doesn't look fit either. It's nullified Rashford as a left winger, which I know Keane hates personally. But when you look at it in that sense, it takes away our players' core strengths. And Hella's mentioned it, funnily enough, in the chat. She's saying, but for God's sake, make changes when it's not working. We've got quality on the bench. You only get the odd minutes, 10 minutes.
But Reece, last season this happened as well. If you remember, there was a lot of times where he was playing players out of position, and it didn't work. It didn't work. We played Bruno out on the right. We played Rashford up front and Weghorst as a number 10. There was times last year where, fundamentally there was players playing out of position. And I know, look, Bruno can play anywhere. Bruno Fernandes is a magnificent footballer. And despite what the English media say about him, I think he's a player who I think has excelled massively in this squad since he's come in. He's been one of our better players. Yeah. But when you have one of the best creators in the league, you need to be playing him in his natural position. When you have Rashford, who's arguably one of the best left wingers in world football, you need to be playing him out there. And
I agree.
I've said it for the longest time. He can't play up front. He can't play with his back to goal. He can't do that. And I think that's where, when I look at Rashford and I look at Bruno, especially when I look at them two, they're so fundamental to how we play football, and then we need to be playing them in their proper positions. Jadon Sancho, you mentioned a minute ago, we're looking at problems on the right hand side, and we're looking at problems with number 9s, etc. When Rasmus Højlund does come in, and we do have a focal point up there, I would like to see Jadon Sancho come in and play in the right wing, because we've seen when he had Erling. I'm not now, before people jump down my throat, I'm not comparing Haaland to Højlund. Højlund to Haaland, sorry. I'm not comparing them two at all. But,
no one is except weirdos. Let's be real.
Yeah, but when Sancho played at Dortmund and he had a focal point up there, that's where he had a lot of goal contributions in terms of goals and assists, because him and Haaland did link up well. Since Sancho's come to the club, you mentioned Anthony not linking up with the striker, but neither is Jadon Sancho, and that's his fundamental part of his game. There was link up play. and intricate passing. So like that's where I would like to see if he can excel, because I do think if you look at the skill set that he has, if we can get a right or one of our right backs, whether it's Stalo or Wan-Bissaka, to overlap with him and him linking up with the striker, we can create patterns of play, and I think that's something that we do need to see fundamentally this season.
I think one thing is about Ten Hag that is a problem. Obviously, I did mention it to you a couple of weeks ago. Is my biggest issue with Ten Hag is there's no. If this had been a relatively inexperienced manager, right, we'd all be chopping at their heads. We would. Let's be real. We would all be absolutely like going all gung ho on them, because you would expect them to learn and do better. Ten Hag is an experienced manager. He's won trophies, but his stubbornness and his not willingness to learn from the repetitive mistakes is going to cost him. And I said it on the re-show I was on last week or the week before. I was like, I do not want to see rinse repeat of another manager, because they are not learning from mistakes.
But like at the moment, you know what I'd say to that is
that you know what I mean. That worries me. That is a concern I don't want to have.
You know what I'd say to that is though, right? Is you get Kobbie Mainoo back fit, you get Rasmus Højlund in, you can then start getting their players in their best positions, and then we'll see this team play to its strengths. I think right now it's kind of it's an awkward situation, because obviously Mount's new signing, you have to play him. You can't just drop him straight away, even though like last week I was saying in the bigger game, play McTominay, shore things up, away from home. Yeah. But at the moment, like there's certain players out. He probably should have started Jadon Sancho as the false nine last week, though, because he's played there all preseason and done well there. But Rashford, he did score goals up front last season. So he even though it's not naturally his best position, but he did do the job up there in certain occasions last season. I think the thing about Erik ten Hag is, I think a lot of people are giving criticism for not learning from mistakes. Look at Brighton and Brentford last season, them first two games. We're talking about our first two games right now. He learned from that, and he changed. He changed a lot.
That's true.
Remember, he put Anthony Elanga into the team last season against Liverpool in that game where he didn't start the first two games. And he put McTominay in there beside Eriksen. So, he has made changes when he sees fit. And I think, look, there is a couple of players out, and you have. No, I didn't get that jersey in Mega Store, by the way, Trevor.
I knew you were going to see that comment. That's why I didn't
get that in the Mega Store. But look, there's certain things that Erik ten Hag has done to change things when the going has got tough last season. And I just hope now when the squad gets back fit, when you have Kobbie Mainoo, when you have Mason Mount back, you have Rasmus Højlund in there, do you see the likes of Rashford go back out to the left wing? Garnacho being that impact player off the bench. Jadon Sancho or Anthony, one to two of them on the right hand side. And all of a sudden, then things will start to click. I think people are overreacting too much to the first two games. Our fan base is probably the most reactionary fan base in world football. And you can argue maybe Arsenal fans are probably in there in amongst that. But I think, look, we have to give the manager patience. He has credit in the bank. Yeah. He won a trophy. He got top four. True. If all four of us who were here having the conversation last season after them first two games, if you told us we would have finished third and won a trophy, and arguably, went far in Europe and get to an FA Cup final, none of us here with a straight face would have said, yeah, we'll do all that.
To be fair, I did say on my predictions, I've seen at least two trophies, and I at least got one, so I'm half right.
We got one, well, you're ever the optimist.
Even so, exactly.
Just another thing as well, talking about the start of the season, and we're talking about bringing McTominay back into the team as some sort of answer. Now, I'm sorry, and I can see why people are talking why he should have come on last weekend when we needed him, because he was the best option. But McTominay, right? Let's not forget, there's a number of reasons why Erik ten Hag is hesitant about putting him into the team. He's not top. He's a good player. He has his roles, but I think Ten Hag would like a lot more quality to fall back on. And maybe by not bringing him on last weekend, before Mount's injury, it was a message to the club. Now, because of United's planning, or perhaps lack of, we're now in a situation where he has to play him, and he can't sell him because of the injuries. And again, you're going into this season. If you look on Twitter, people are kind of almost suggesting that McTominay is after becoming Pirlo over the summer, because he apparently was man of the match against Everton in a behind closed doors friendly. But trust me, he comes back into the team. He comes back into the team, and I give it 2 weeks tops, and people will be having meltdowns over it again.
like he's always been hit and miss, like inconsistent player. Like people just think he's a messiah because he plays well for Scotland. I mean, like saying as a Scottish guy, I could play centre back for Scotland. I'm not that good as centre back, but I'd probably play better than him. And I'm just saying.
Look,
like,
he has his role, and he's a very limited player. He has
a role. It's called bench. He has a role. It's called bench. Press it. Press the bench button. Just stay there. But you mentioned lack of planning, and that is generally a problem for us. So, like, it's even worse. We're going to go up against Alanga. Alanga's going to have free room in a front two. Whether he comes off the bench or he starts, he's going to look at our defence and he's like, you know what? Let's just have a go. Let's just have a go. Let's be real. He isn't going to, like, he's going to come out as Alanga's going to come out as, like, all that. And I'm like, you know what? If Alanga scores against us, fair play. But the lack of plan itself is an issue for United because it's not just 1 year, it's not just 5 years. We could go back, a decade, the amount of times United haven't planned for anything, and it's always been consistently the same issue.
Like it goes back to what Phil touched on at the beginning of the podcast with all the decisions that are made, the delay with every decision. It's hard to plan. You know, Ten Hag and the people above him, John Murtough, and they might have great plans, and the scouts might have fantastic plans. But all those plans have to get the green light at the end of the day. And you'll see journalists now, and they'll be pinpointing different people, maybe Ten Hag, maybe John Murtough, maybe Richard Arnold, ignoring the big problem. And the fact of the matter is, once we have a takeover, there'd be a lot of those members in the hierarchy that'll be replaced anyway.
True.
Scott McTominay is in the same utterly ridiculous situation De Gea was in, where it's like, we can't afford your replacement. We'd like to get rid of you, so can you stay and play? I mean, it's fucking ridiculous, right? I mean, Scott McTominay's in a situation where United have made it clear to him that the best Scott McTominay doesn't form part of Erik Ten Hag's team. How do you motivate a player like that? You know, how do you get a player that wants to play for his manager in a situation like that when you know the only reason why you're there is because they can't afford your replacement? I think it's utterly fucking ridiculous. You know, United are the only football club that's desperate to be regulated by FFP, and everyone else just ignores it. And so, you know, this Kieran Maguire did a perfect article on this back in June. How United could easily mitigate FFP if the owners put 100 million in. They would be able to spend that. This rarely gets mentioned in analysis. I don't know why. So it's not a question of being hampered by FFP, right?
Yeah,
it's a question of a lack of investment. Yeah. So you know, these are things that could easily overcome, and sign key players every summer. They don't sign key players in key positions. At this level, you're not going to get away with that. At this level, you will get beat. And so, to me, I think it's completely ridiculous that a football club the size of Manchester United aren't capable of going out and bringing in a defensive midfield. I mean, who's United's contemporaries? Real Madrid. Real Madrid is sitting in midfield of Valverde, Tchouaméni, Camavinga, Luka Modric, Toni Kroos. I mean,
Camavinga when he's not playing left back.
Every single one of those players would walk into United's midfield. Walk into it, right? And this is what United are comparing themselves with, right? I mean, City are going out and trying to send Nunez, right? They just signed Jeremy Doku, they signed Kovacic, they signed Josko Vardiol. Now, this is the team that won the treble last season, mind you. What they're not saying is, hey, you got to sell 16 fucking academy kids before you can go out and get Matheus Nunez, right? I mean, it's just absurd, right?
Agreed.
And, you know, their team facing, 115 charges. But I just want to say something on that because United fans often use that. If City didn't exist, United still wouldn't have won fuck all. United's problems are 100% their own making. United's, because I don't want this to mask the real cause of the problem. Because it's easy to sit there and say 115 charges, right? United's ineptitude and refusal to run the football club as a football club. And this was evident in the Mason Greenwood shit, evident in the Marco Nautovic shit, evident in the Super League shit. The refusal to run it as a football club and run it commensurate with values that dictate how your ethics and your values, not based on social media responses, because all of this could be avoided if you actually had guiding morals, ethics, and principles, right? The problem is when profit is your only guiding principle, these are the mistakes you make, right? This is exactly what happens. Super League is the mistake you make when your only guiding principle is profit. Finding a mitigating reason to keep Mason Greenwood is what happens, right? All these things are based on this problem, right? So you take a, we've watched Moises Caicedo break the British transfer record this summer. Jude Bellingham go to Real Madrid for 100 million. Two players that it could have had, didn't, right? Erling Haaland could have had, didn't, right? You're confronted with the ineptitude everywhere you look. Harry Maguire, 6-year contract. Are you fucking joking me? Why? No, but why? Why did you give David De Gea 375 grand a week? Was someone else willing to give him 360? Like, where'd you come up with that number? Who just sat down and said, you know what we need to do, lads? We need to give David De Gea 375 grand a week. Why? I mean, who's sitting around a table going, well, wait a minute, lads. No one else is going to offer more than 200. Why do we need to go to 375? You know,
exactly.
I mean, let's give him 200, and if he wants to leave because he can get a better offer, okay, right?
Yeah.
I mean, everywhere, Maguire on 190 grand a week for what? You know, I mean, I just don't understand the repeated stupidity. Brandon Williams, which I haven't wanted to sign Brandon Williams last season, he would have been one of their highest paid players for what? This is insane.
And I think that's
anyway, this is the real reason why they're in this mess, because there's absentee landlords that run the football club who have no guiding principles, who have no accountability for the people that run the football club, who don't turn around and say, this is how this club is going to be run. This is uncompromising. If you can't do this, you're out. But the problem is Richard Arnold is the highest paid CEO in the whole league. So he's clearly doing a job in exactly the way that the Glazers want him to do it. So he does not get to come out and say, you know what, this is all the Glazers' fault. Well, then fucking resign. Right?
Yeah.
And show me that it's not you. Show me that it's not your view. Show me that this isn't the result of your leadership or lack thereof. I'd give him some credit if he did that. So anyway, lads, I'm sorry. United's problems inside that football club, they have their own entropy. Second year, same thing. Every manager qualified for the Champions League. The preceding, Solskjaer got sacked the year after he qualified for the Champions League. Mourinho got sacked the year after he qualified for the Champions League. Both of those managers were undermined that summer in the transfer market. Both of them were lied to. And here we are again in exactly the same bullshit.
Yeah, I agree. And funnily enough, that actually transitions to obviously the team we're about to speak about. So obviously that is Forest. Now, when you look at like Forest, obviously last year Forest were ruined when they came up to the Premier League. Pretty much the entire squad was built on loans because obviously they had players that were loaned in, lost amount of players. They spent ample amount of money, which we've all to a degree spoken about. Players they brought in, but they've actually gelled to their club. They're now steadily in the Premier League. Good squad, good style of football. They're now coming to us for the third game where we are under serious pressure to actually get not just another win, because we badly need our response after Spurs, but we need to start climbing up the league. They've got a good squad, Forest. And I have to admit, I like some of the players. Like Morgan Gibbs-White is a player I think is absolutely brilliant in his position. I like that Iwan Awe, or how you flame pronounce his name, like difficult name, quality player. When you look at United, on paper, we should be battering them 3-4-5-0. But when you look at how hard they work under their manager, they are going to be a genuinely tough threat for us. And especially as well because their owners actually genuinely put money into the club to actually keep them consistent in the league. And hopefully they don't have second season syndrome. I'd actually like them to stay in the league because it's good to have a refreshing side in the league. But Keane, your thoughts on Forest at the weekend, and generally, how are you thinking about the game as well as a whole?
Look, I think in terms of Forest, they were a bit mad last summer, didn't they? They signed about 30 players, and then Steve Cooper had a hard enough job to try to settle all them in. You kind of seen in the second half of the season, they kind of they done very well at home. And that's how they stayed up in the Premier League. I think obviously the likes of Morgan Gibbs-White, Brennan Johnson, and Hawaii, players like that were kind of the core of kind of how Forest done well last year. Obviously, I think Anthony Elanga is a superb signing for them. I think he'll do really well there.
I agree.
Look at it again for us. I think he's probably one of them players that when you look at our United's wingers, we've a clusterfuck of wingers there. He never would have kind of made it at United, but I think Forest to be good for him.
And they dropped so far down the pecking order as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But like when I look at Forest, I think this weekend, I think it's important for us that we put on a commanding performance. I think that's what we need to see here. I think we need to obviously there has to be a reaction from the first two games. I think obviously the first one obviously being that look, we're at home. There's a fan sit-in protest after the game, which look we will be talking to 1958 tomorrow night about that.
Yeah, check that out, folks. Check that out.
But what I will say is, for us, we're looking at a team that we're playing against a team that's still trying to stabilize and trying to stay in the league. We cannot be going to Old Trafford on Saturday, and we can't be sitting there getting dominated. We can't have another game where a team is battering us at home, even though we got a result the last day. I'd like to see us take a bit of control again, players that kind of flex their muscles and like be Man United players, because at the end of the day, there's ways to conduct yourself on the football pitch, and I think Grand Theft Auto with Phil.
Very true.
Don't get 5 stars while you're on the show there, Phil, will you? But look, for us, like obviously, I think ideally I wouldn't like to see Anthony Elanga come back and haunt us on Saturday.
I do agree with Hella's comment. I actually think he will score, or I think he will be one of the top 3 performers for Forest on the pitch. I do think you will see a performance from Elanga. Elanga's problem, we all know this, it's not that Elanga's a bad player. He's not. He got completely found out too quickly. He was never given a chance to just ease himself in. He was flung into the deep end because we were absolutely goosed. And he was flung in. His best game was Atletico, and he hadn't scored a goal since. And he was never given a chance. The guy was, the minute he got found out, that was it. He was finished at United.
Yeah,
no worries. No worries. Vice City is another way, another route. We'll still get there. I like GT. I had to get one reference up. But it is that circumstance. Absolutely.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you, lads. What's the signal?
As we were just saying there, like just talking about like Forest and Elanga and all that, and like situation for him. Obviously, it's good to see that he'll at least be given a chance now as a player where he will not get found out so quickly with Forest, where less pressure as well for a club as well. Like compared to United, obviously Forest in their own right have history, but he will have something different at Forest to prove, and you have a different manager who will try and find a different way to use him. And if anything, I hope he enjoys Forest. I hope Elanga does. I've got nothing against Elanga in any shape or form. He's a young lad, decent player. You know what's worse as well? His pace would have been so good against Forest. For us, it would have been. That's another thing. Dale, what about you? What's your thoughts on Forest as a whole? And any scepticism around United going into this game? Are you a little bit worried, or do you think United will do enough to get the result?
Well, look, Forest at home should be really the perfect game that we're asking for right now after the start we've had. Not only do we need to go out and prove that by getting a win, but I think the fans really want to see a good performance, a convincing performance, because there was times in that first half against Spurs that I thought we played quite well. I watched the game back and I thought, fine margins in the game and that if we got a penalty, could have ended a lot differently. But against Forest, I expect we need to start well. We need to show them who's fucking boss, because we haven't been doing that this season. We haven't been grabbing games by the scruff of the neck. And I actually think, although we're talking about Mason Mount's injury being a blow for United, well, some might not agree with that. But I think Christian Eriksen coming in is exactly what we could need against Forest, against a team that might play a deep line defence.
I agree.
His passing might pick him out, but as Keane mentioned, I would not start him at the Emirates. No way.
If we're sitting saying that it's a blessing to have Mason Mount injured after a second game, what the fuck did we say? Like that? No, I mean that's a serious problem. And people saying, well, Jadon Sancho should start. Jadon Sancho, if he plays as a false 9, is going to play really, really high up the pitch, and exactly the same problem will happen that happened with Mason Mount. In that, once you get caught in possession, they're going to be wide open, and so. I don't know how you can play Jadon Sancho in that position without playing a holding midfielder beside Casemiro. So for me, Eriksen doesn't have great legs. He's a bit slow. He's good on the ball. But Mason Mount, being injured or not, should have no relevance in the outcome of the game against Forest.
No.
And if Manchester United are Mason Mount away from losing against Forest, we have bigger fucking problems than what we realise. I mean, Forest are a decent team, but Forest aren't going to any top 6 team and winning. So if United, their away form's abysmal. What saved them was the fact that they were really strong at home. If they're no longer strong at home, we have serious, serious problems. And, I'm telling you, I am not super confident that United will win this game. Because I haven't seen anything from United that's convinced me in a long time. I haven't seen it even that 4-0 Chelsea result. Chelsea had a lot of chances in that game. A lot. And it was very similar to the 4-0 Chelsea game when Dan James scored a couple. Chelsea hit the post twice and stuff. And it wasn't a 4-0. 4-0 wasn't a true reflection of the scoreline. United were awful against Villa. Very lucky to win that game. Lucky to beat Bournemouth away. Easily lost to Brighton, where they were dreadful in that game. Easily lost to West Ham, where they were dreadful in that game. And I'm going, when was the last time United played really well? Really well, will you remember?
Barcelona away, probably.
So this is that Barcelona game. So anything after that, if you look at United after that, I would say they played well against Everton at home, where they should have won by about 30 goals, but then it's Everton. But I'm looking at this and I'm going, I can't remember, and I'm talking months, even towards the end of the season, when United impressed me. And this is a long time, so why should we expect it to go out against Forest and play exceptionally well? This has been a problem that when we look at last season, they hobbled over the line and said, okay, they'll strengthen the squad next summer. But that squad, remember, they lost Sabitzer. They lost Weghorst. So the squad, actually, in terms of numbers, because De Gea's gone too, is weaker than what it was last season. That's fucking ridiculous. Right? I mean, that is totally ridiculous. I mean, United should be sitting on their 7th or 8th signing right now. If they were serious about squad depth. And
not to mention as well, sorry to cut ahead of you, Phil, but not to mention, you mentioned about like Weghorst, Sabitzer, and obviously like 2 players were on loans, but also like David De Gea's gone. We say this as well when you mentioned about strikers. Martial's hardly ever there. That's technically a loss anyway, because that's a crucial member to the squad where we have to play one player in a different position they're not even used to, just to cover anyway in a game when we really need to. Like that's another problem.
You can never have a plan that includes Martial, because you just can't rely on him, and you have to assume that he's going to be injured. If he's fit, great, it's a bonus. But whatever you plan for at the start of the season, it cannot include Anthony Martial being a part of it. You have to assume that he's not going to be available for 3/4 of your games. And if you're planning your season and counting Anthony Martial as a key member of your squad, you deserve everything you get, because the guy just doesn't have a body that can stand up to the rigors of professional football.
See, Tom Heaton gave an interview this week saying that Martial is their best finisher. It's just a shame he's made of fucking chipsticks.
It's really, one thing I won't criticize a player for is getting injured, right? Because ultimately that's not their fault. And I have no doubt that it's utterly devastating for Anthony Martial and probably embarrassing to a degree, in the same way it was for Phil Jones and everyone else. Because, it's cost the guy the peak years of his career. He was an exceptional player. And I will never criticize a player for getting injured. That's just bad luck. So for me, like, that is... There's a lot of things I can criticize Anthony Martial for. Hang on, sorry, lad. I'm using a stolen credit card here. Let me see if this works. There's a lot of things.
Can I just say?
I gotta love live YouTube, lads. Honestly.
Can I just say this is perfect, because Trevor also said, tune in next week to Shopping with Phil. You get that on tonight's show.
This is not going out. Edit this.
Best show I've done in a long time.
Sorry, my dealer likes it.
I did a podcast once with one of our Stretty news writers, and he was in the middle of an aisle at Asda.
Oh God!
walking around the aisle, so he hasn't been on the podcast since.
Is that right? Right. Yeah, so
Fox's classic cookies, $2.59. Beep. Okay, what are we talking about?
Oh, stop, lads.
But that is what YouTube's about. It's about generally good laugh, and that's what we're having. But it's a great point, and obviously you can't have those types of players in your plans because, like you said, you deserve to get what you want. You deserve to get what for your reasons, but it just shows like one thing that we've always said about United as general is like the living fear we get as United fans going into certain games where we should be genuinely confident. And Phil said it there, he ain't confident about the Forest game. I'm not so confident, but I still think we should be good enough to win. But when you have those reasonable doubts, we should if you have those doubts, you cannot say confidently, "Oh, United should be winning something this year." If you feel those little bit of doubts, even though we should be winning something because of the squad we've got, if you've got those doubts, we are still in massive trouble. Well, geez, we are screwed. Phil's checking the United accounts. Beep beep. Access denied.
Just a bit of an update.
Insufficient funds.
Just a bit. Fuck's sake.
Would you like a receipt? Would you like cash? I just don't have any.
That's you now trying to pay for Sophia and Amrabat. Insufficient funds declared.
Oh, look at those lads, we're in business.
Dale, what was the update there? You were saying
the update was so a few reports this week that Højlund could make his debut against Forest. I was told yesterday he didn't train, and I was told today he hasn't trained either. So that's now looking unlikely.
Oh, Jesus.
Samuel Luckhurst said today, didn't he, that he's not going to be back till after the September international break. Like,
there was a feeling that he could be in the matchday squad for Forest, but as I said, the last 2 days, Hurley hasn't trained.
Yeah, it doesn't look like he can start.
It's an absolute joke.
Well, like he said earlier, lads.
Oh, it's sorry. When I say hasn't trained, I mean with the main group, not on his own.
We are live to 1945, coming back to 2023 now.
Just to clarify, when I say he hasn't trained, what I mean is he hasn't trained with the rest of the players.
Yeah, he's trained alone, isn't he? Yeah.
Even if he has a relative amount of fitness, it's not going to be enough where he can play. I doubt he can even play 30 minutes. I don't think he can. I don't think he'll be able to.
But if he's not training with the group on a Thursday, he's not going to be playing on a Saturday, is he? Like, look, let's just be realistic.
Let's hope not.
I think what Ten Hag, one of his rulings is if they don't do 3 days, if they can't get 3 days of training, then they can't make the squad.
Yeah, I think regardless, these players should be doing more than 3 days after the ridiculous statistics that we saw after the game against Spurs, when we got completely outmatched by them physically on every grand flaming level. Those players should be doing double. This is my opinion. It might sound very cruel, but I said the same thing last year. The way they got outworked by Spurs, they should be doing double training sessions up to the Flaming Forest game anyway. That's what I'm thinking. But Keane, going into that though, what is your overall prediction going into the game against Forest? Like, are you confident? Are you not so confident? Are you meh? I mean, to be fair, that's more than acceptable with me. But what's your prediction going into Forest? And do you think United will get a result?
Yeah, look, I do think United will get a result. I think, unlike actually the last couple of weeks, I actually think we might start slow enough, but I think it's going to be one of them games where we actually grow into the game. I'm going to go 2-0 United. I fancy us hopefully to keep a clean sheet. This is more optimism than probably realism, because we hardly clean sheets sometimes are hard to come by. But look, I'm going to go 2-0, and I'm going to go Andre Onana assist this weekend. Because Brian Murphy said this on Twitter, we're going to see a Onana to Rashford assist at some point this season with his range of passing. So I'm gonna bank on this weekend. Andre Onana anytime assist at Old Trafford. So that's my prediction. 2-0. Andre Onana assist.
Should put him in midfield.
Yeah, the whole midfield problem there. Sure, he's probably our best technical players.
When it says a lot when your goalkeeper's your best passer, I mean, frankly, I would put him in midfield. Dale, what about you, my man? It's been good seeing you, as always. Good hearing you as well. What's your prediction for Saturday?
I'm going to go for a 3-1 win.
3-1. And you, Phil, off the Starship Enterprise, what's your prediction for Saturday? And I know you said you weren't overly confident, but your closing comments on the game for Saturday.
I think we lost your audio, Phil.
Yeah, I think we have.
It's the best thing he said all night.
Oh, oh, Jesus Christ. If he hears this back, all I'm going to say is he's coming for you. And I absolutely condone it. I can't hear him. Nah, his audio's definitely gone.
I think he heard me as well.
Yeah. I hope he comes back just to verbally destroy you for 5 minutes. I think Keane would allow that. Me personally, I'm just going to... Oh, there he is.
Hold on, don't be writing me off just yet. Don't be writing me off just yet.
Don't worry, the Starship Enterprise has its connection. So your closing comments, your predictions, and obviously shut down Dale for that.
Fair man, this should come with a citation. On more drugs than these German weightlifters, so this opinion is subject to change. I think United will win this weekend. I think that I don't expect it to be where it'll be convincing. I think it'll be a bit ugly. I'm not confident they'll keep a clean sheet though, and I think they'll get the win. I'm going to be really interested to see the body language of the players because I think that's more telling than the performances or the tactics or anything else. Because you can talk about tactics and shape all you want, but if you have players that are going out in the field that aren't desperate to win, none of those things matter. And I didn't see that against Wolves, and I didn't see it against Spurs. And when United fall behind in games, they lack the ability to change the game, to get back in it, and they're really fucking easy to defend against because the balls just get clipped down the channels every single time. And you saw it constantly because there's nothing down the middle. There's no synergy. There's no creativity. It's just all so slow and predictable. And that's the thing that worries me. If United fall behind against Forest, that would concern me because they don't look like they have the ability to change games. Once Spurs went ahead against them, it was really easy. So I think Ten Hag, one of the things that I noticed that was different about him after the game against Spurs was that was the first time I felt like he was defending his methods more than he was defending the team. And because I felt like he was under pressure and I hadn't seen him that generate. So I think really, really important United win this weekend because I would not want to see them go to Arsenal, the Emirates, off the back of another defeat against Forest because it would be a disaster.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree. Me, I'm just going to say flat. I'm just saying a 1-0 win because I ain't confident. In all respect. Keane, closing comments from you?
Yeah, I suppose Andre Onana assist this weekend. I'm going to say this now, Andre Onana assist. And also as well, just for our viewers, our interview with 1958 be out tomorrow night at 8:15. Obviously, we do know a lot of our viewers are match goers as well, so make sure if you are going to the game Saturday that you do follow 1958, do the sit-in protest, and look, obviously as well, like, look, it goes without saying that the fight against the Glazers is far from over yet, so look, do your part. And look, thanks to the two boys for coming on, and the link for Stretty News and be on the pitch as well will be in the video link description as well, so do check the lads' content out as well. They do great stuff.
Thank you.
Cheers, lads. Thanks for having me.
Thanks a million.
Good seeing everybody.